Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called One Free Lesson, written by Sjanevardsson. Andre started the morning of his 80th birthday the same way he started most of his mornings. He dressed, made sure his keys were in his pocket, grabbed his cane, and walked the mile to the cemetery, where he sat in silence, leaning on his wife's headstone. Rather than heading straight home for some breakfast, however, he decided to treat himself. He caught the bus into the town, free for all riders over 60. The drivers hadn't asked for his ID in the last 5 years. Once in the shopping area around the bus depot, he walked past a chain diner advertising all the senior discounts and went to a locally owned diner that connected to a bar that would open in a few hours. The bar and diner were known as seedy by some, as the only neutral ground in which to conduct business by others. Andre chose a booth in the corner, where he had a view of the diner and entry and the connecting door to the bar. He sat at the outside edge of the bench seat, resting his cane next to him, and adjusted his belt. He waved off the menu offered by the young woman waiting at the tables. "I will have a half-portion chicken fried steak with sourdough toast, black coffee, and water, please."
"I'll get that started for you right away, sir," she said.
Andre hadn't been in the diner in at least a decade, but it seemed that nothing had changed, beyond the grime being more deeply ground into the linoleum tiles and, of course, the staff. They were all too young to have worked anywhere back then. The steak was all unchanged, with paprika in the sausage milk gravy, and the hash browns cooked right to the edge of burnt without going over. The sourdough was different, or he thought it was, at least. He could have just been remembering as it more sour than it was. He took his time with the meal, watching the other diners come and go. He recognized most of them, not as individuals, but as players in the world from which he had retired. He didn't pay much attention to the ones that he could pick out easily by their clothing or behavior, but focused more on the ones who left him wondering. Anyone he could suss out at a glance was not likely to be a threat, but those that struck him as being a civilian he paid closer attention to. It wasn't an attempt at surveillance, just noticing things, as he'd done all of his life. The guy in the courier windbreaker with the backpack slung to allow quick access. There was something long in the backpack, and he'd left the courier pouch on the bike outside. He was too obvious. The young woman that parked a motorcycle out in front came in calling for eggs, toast, and coffee, though he couldn't tell for sure. To Andre, she stuck out by not sticking out. Anywhere other than here, she'd blend right in, but she seemed too comfortable for a civilian in this environment. It meant either that she was oblivious or very good. He kept a sliver of his attention on her as the courier grabbed the to-go bag and dropped it into his backpack when Andre saw the pistol grip of the short shotgun. The motorcycle girl talked with the waitress for a moment before looking around the diner. The crowd had been building, and there were no empty tables. She approached his booth. "Excuse me, sir. May I join you?" she asked. Andre nodded, and she sat in the center of the bench opposite him. Again, she was either oblivious or confident enough in her abilities to position herself in a less than optimal position. She set her helmet on the table next to her. Her food arrived a moment later, and she thanked the waitress before turning her attention to him. "Thanks for letting me sit you. My name is Emily," she said. Andre nodded. "Nice to meet you, young lady. What brings you in?" "Cheap breakfast. My roommate works here, and they let me park my bike out front so nobody will mess with it. What about you?" "Good chicken fried steak. Thought I'd treat myself." He kept his left hand under the table as he ate with his right. He took time in between bites. He was in no rush. Emily wolfed down her eggs and went back to making conversation while she took her time with the toast and coffee.
"What did you used to do, or still do, for work?"
"After Vietnam," he said, "I had enough of the army and just bounced around from job to job." "You?"
"Mechanic," she said, "at the bike shop."
She could mean exactly what she said, or it could be a euphemism. The bike shop could be exactly that, or have something to do with the outlaw bikers that had moved into town 20 years earlier. While he was thinking about the bikers, one of them walked in, a giant of a man openly wearing his colors, with a 1% patch on his chest. He waved at the waitress and walked straight for Andre's booth, where he pushed the woman to the inside of the bench and sat beside her. Imagine that, he said. I get to meet the left hand of the Nikolov family in the flesh. There is no such thing, Andrei said, as the Nikolov family or any left hand. Don't be so modest, the Vicar said. Just because Nico's gone doesn't mean that you are.
Let him be, Fang. He's just an old Vietnam vet having breakfast, Emily said.
Sorry, sister, but he used to be the #1 triggerman of all the Russian mob around here. Before he got rid of them and took over.
Fang leaned forward.
Now he's just a washed-up old man.
Andrei took a sip of his coffee.
You at least got part of that right. I am just an old man. Andrei Striga Petrenko, Fang said, leaning back. I owe you for at least half a dozen brothers that you did back in '02. You was old even then. You must be mistaken, he said. I think any old man you went into war with 20 years ago would be dead by now. I should beat you to death raw here. I have no doubt that you could do that, Andrei said. But if I am who you think I am, why would I let you get close enough to?
Fang whipped out a knife and started to rise when a pop-like sound firecracker rang out and he stopped, falling back into his seat, the knife dropping to the table where Andrei swept it onto the floor. Andrei reached into his pocket, pulled out a $100 bill and placed it on his plate. Fang was cursing and groaning, while Emily was doing her best to stuff napkins against the wound to stop the bleeding. Andrei noted that no one in the diner wanted to get involved, which was all the better.
That son is a gut shot. Hurts like hell. I know. You're going to be a little gray there. What you're feeling now is shock. You'll survive, most likely. If you or any of your brothers come at me again, you won't. Understand?
Fang responded only with more curses and groans.
I'll take that as a yes, he said,
holstering the suppressed pistol that he'd helped on his lap while he ate, and grabbed his cane.
This is your one real lesson, son. Fear the old man in a profession where men die young.
End of story. Story number 2. The Price, written by In Babylon They Wept. Mithrian's hands were thick-boned and knotted with scars, unfit for tools for anything delicate. Yet they were all he had, so he traded patience for true dexterity. Where humans had the skill and elves had grace, dwarves had time. His fingers carefully tugged and knotted fabrics apart, blanket by blanket, twist by twist. The bundle came undone until at last an infant lay on the war table. It was human, unmistakably so, round ears peeking through the halo of blonde hair. It reached forward with tiny hand and wrapped all 10 of its fingers around the dwarf's thumb, both its index fingers still lingering a full inch from meeting. Mithrian looked down at him with true warmth. Then he looked back up at the elves and gave the command, "Kill it!" No one at the table moved. The circle of elves looked from the child to him, then back. To their credit, the tension was more born of confusion than moral wavering. They knew they would not do it. They knew that they would not do it. They did not know why they were being asked. Salathian, the elder, spoke. "No," he replied. Mithrian nodded. The refusal was not merely hoped for. It had been expected. "Thus is why you will not win." The table sat in contemplative silence. Salathan, bravest amongst the elves, most forward, most dwarf, spoke again. "Because we will not murder an infant. Because this infant is the son of Agamades. He is the last king of the hinterlands. Humans grow old quickly. In 25 years he will be a man, and he will start a war just like the one you are fighting today. A war suspiciously similar to the one you fought 25 years ago." The words were calm, but he watched the general's hands closely. Even a twitch towards the belt knife would be enough to betray temptation. Yet each hand remained perfectly still. There was a short pulse of shame in him, envy. When he'd had this conversation with his own war council at those centuries ago, there had been several who considered it, who had considered degrading themselves for something as empty as war.
You will not win the war. You could, but you see the cost now, and you know it is too high. You want to honor your treaties, your duties, your integrity, but you know the word for that which lacks soul but keeps contracts. You fought them with me in the deepest, darkest depths of stone. Salathan had gone white. He knew he'd been so focused on winning this war that he failed to look ahead to the next, and the next, and the next. The cycle stood out to him, infinite and spiraling. He froze at the thought of walking down into the abyss. I could raise him. I could try and break the cycle. He would learn from another human, another infant that grows to manhood. He will learn, and he will burn your house and throne. Do you think that I'm so wise as to see the future without having lived the past? Whatever cleverness you will suggest, I have tried. I fought 10 generations of warriors on the same field before I realized I had 3 options: to burn my soul, to trap myself in endless war, or to lose. So I lost. His voice cracked at the last 3 words. The infant had begun to fuss over the cold, and he went to work swaddling it again. He made his point. Now it was time to take the princeling home. But as his hands made their slow work, he gave his final warning. You did not know when you started this, and you would not have listened if I had told you. But you know now. And if I meet you in the deepest depths, I will know what sent you here. The only pity you'll find from me is a second death. He finished his work in silence, leaving as he came. The quiet lasted long after. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Bitmori, Terran on Air, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Lightjock, Dragzoon WRE, Lord Azrakul, and Arcadian. Thank you.